If I offered you a barrel of oil and $37 just to take it, would you think I'm crazy? Or would you think the world has ended? Because on April 20th, 2020, that was the literal reality of the global market. Why would a producer pay you to take their product? Is it because the oil suddenly became worthless? Or is it because we ran out of the one thing more valuable than the liquid itself? Space to put it. Welcome to a journey through the things you thought you knew about oil. We're going to ask the questions that nobody thinks to ask, like, is oil really black? And did the industry really start where you think it did? Let's start with the name. Why do we call it petroleum? If petra means rock and oleum means oil, are we admitting that we are essentially burning rock oil? Does that change how you look at the ground beneath your feet? Throughout this video, I'm not going to give you answers. I'm going to give you puzzles. And by the end, you'll realize that your morning routine is a series of chemical miracles you never invited. For instance, did you know that the wax in your child's crayons and the vanilla in your cheap ice cream share a very dark, very ancient secret? Let's dig deeper. If you look at the walls of ancient Babylon, what do you think holds those bricks together? Magic? Or is it the same substance that keeps a modern roof from leaking? They used asphalt, a thick natural form of oil, as mortar and waterproofing. If the oil age is modern, then why were we using it to build civilizations 5,000 years ago? Think drilling for oil requires massive steel platforms? How about bamboo and iron? In 4th century China, they reached deep into the earth using heavy iron bits attached to long bamboo ropes. They were drilling over 240 meters down while Europe was still in the Dark Ages. If they had the technology to harness this energy then, why did it take us another 1,500 years to make it a global empire? They were drilling over 240 meters down while Europe was still in the Dark Ages. If they had the technology to harness this energy then, why did it take us another 1,500 years to make it a global empire? But what if I told you the pioneer was a Polish pharmacist? Ignacy Łukasiewicz performed his first distillation experiments in his pharmacy, but by 1856, he opened the world's first industrial refinery in Ulasowice. His goal wasn't just profit, he wanted to create kerosene for lighting to make the world brighter. Does it bother you that history sometimes forgets the pioneers because they lived in the wrong country? Why did we wait? If oil was always there, leaking from the ground, why did it take a Polish pharmacist and Chinese ropes to prove we could harness it? Even George Washington owned a burning spring. In his time, there was no industrial use for it, so he saw it merely as a curiosity. What are we ignoring today that will be obvious in 100 years? And here's a riddle for you. If oil is so dangerous, why can't you light a liquid pool of it with a single match? Oil itself doesn't burn, only its vapors do. If you don't believe me, ask a firefighter why a cold barrel of crude is safer than a warm one. It's all about the flashpoint.
We talk about oil spills as the ultimate enemy of nature. But what if nature is its own biggest polluter?
About 50% of the oil in our oceans today doesn't come from tankers or broken rigs. It comes from the earth itself. Natural seeps have been leaking oil into the sea for millions of years. If this has been happening since before humans existed, why hasn't the ocean turned into a giant black soup? How does nature manage its own pollution? Meet Alcanivorax borcumensis, a bacteria that thinks an oil spill is an all-you-can-eat buffet. It literally eats hydrocarbons. Does that mean nature already invented a cleanup crew? We are now trying to use these bacteria to fix our mistakes. But wait, if bacteria eat the oil and we use oil to make everything, are we essentially building our world out of bacteria food? Speaking of eating, look at your label. Artificial flavoring, specifically vanillin. Do you know where that comes from? Most synthetic vanillin is synthesized from petrochemicals. It's cheaper than real vanilla beans. Does your dessert taste a little more like a refinery now? Or is chemistry just nature's way of recycling ancient energy? And those antioxidants like BHA and BHT synthesized from oil? They are used to protect the fats and oils in your favorite snacks from going rancid. Does that make your food a chemical archive of prehistoric life? If oil comes from plankton and vanillin comes from oil, isn't your flavoring technically organic? Don't tell your nutritionist I said that. And why do we call it black gold anyway? Have you ever seen sweet crude from Nigeria? It can be light yellow or even have mysterious greenish tints. The color depends on the chemical cocktail inside. Light oil flows like water. Heavy oil flows like molasses. If it's not all black and it's not all liquid, what else have we oversimplified?
Can you see me clearly? If you're wearing contact lenses, you're looking at the world through a thin layer of polymers based on petrochemicals.
We use oil to see, to eat, and even to help our children draw. Those paraffin wax crayons, pure petroleum. Every time a child colors a green tree, they are using a substance from a prehistoric swamp. The oil industry employs over 10 million people directly, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Indirectly, hundreds of millions. If the oil industry vanished tomorrow, who loses their job first? The truck driver or the surgeon whose sterile gloves and heart valves just cease to exist? This is the paradox. We hate the empire of oil, but we love the comfort it provides. Can we have one without the other? Or is our hatred just a form of guilt for a lifestyle we refuse to give up?
Think about your phone. It feels like high-tech silicon and glass, but the resins and insulation that hold it together, all petroleum.
Without oil, your smartphone is just a handful of expensive sand and metal. Is it a tech device, or is it just a very sophisticated way to package a fossil fuel? Back to that negative price in 2020, minus $37. If the price was negative, does that mean the oil was a waste product? No. It meant the global system is so rigid it can't even stop for a day without breaking. Producers couldn't just turn off the tap. If they did, they might ruin the wells forever. So they paid people to take it. It was cheaper to lose money than to stop. Is that a business model or a hostage situation? Even our escape plan, renewable energy, is built on the same foundation. Those giant turbine blades, carbon fiber and epoxy resins, both from oil. We are using oil to build the machines that are supposed to replace oil. If we run out of black gold before we finish the green transition, what happens to the transition? Even your hobbies are part of the web. Nylon guitar strings, polyester yoga mats, plastic fishing lures. We have built a world where fun is a byproduct of refining pus. And here's a final twist. Some of the best oil didn't even come from the ocean. It came from ancient freshwater lakes and algae. If oil is so diverse in color, in origin, in use, why do we treat it as a single, simple enemy? Is it easier to hate a monster than to understand a complex necessity? Look in the mirror. Your clothes, your contact lenses, your toothbrush, the flavoring in your breath mints. You aren't just using oil, you are wrapped in it. If I stripped away everything made from petroleum right now, what would be left of you? A few pieces of wood, some metal, and maybe some wool socks? We started with Chinese iron bits and a Polish pharmacist. We ended with negative prices and oil-eating bacteria. The story of oil isn't just about geology, it's about human ingenuity and its consequences. So I ask you one last time, is oil a curse we need to break, or a bridge we haven't finished crossing? And if we burn the bridge before we reach the other side, what then? If these questions made you look at your vanillin yogurt or your crayons differently, share this video. Let's see who else is living in the petroleum paradox without knowing it. Did you know the first industrial refinery started in Poland, not the USA? Write yes or no in the comments. I bet most of your history teachers didn't even know that. See you in the next one.